Joe Rogan and CNN is discussing this. And so I love to see the hyenas and the people on CNN that is very much biased having this conversation about Joe Rogan. Said that Democrats had him on their side. Let's get the full context and let's break it down.
Patrick, let's start with that idea. When people, if there are such people who say that they need a liberal Joe Rogan, what do you think they actually mean when they say that?
Well, I think the short answer is they do need a new Joe Rogan. The question is, what does that look like? And I don't know if you can actually create it. You know, apparently a lot of Republicans were creating some of these podcasters and so on. So now the mainstream media has changed quite a bit. And I don't know if it's so much about who the person is or if there is a person, it's where they're getting their message to and how they're getting it out there. Because obviously, as Joe Rogan himself said, everybody's getting their information from their phone. So where are you going to get that now? You can go on X like I do all the time and you get it from all sides there. But I think for the Democrats, they need to find a way to get their message out to the people that they didn't get it out to.
Misha, I see you ready to jump here.
I agree with that. I think it's more an understanding of the new ecosystem, where people are getting their media messages from. We know that a lot of it is digital, it's social media. People aren't picking up the newspaper anymore.
Did, right? They like TikTok their way through the coconut summer. And
yeah, nobody cared about the coconuts. I think that it was a misreading of the electorate, but also a misreading of where people are getting their information. But in addition to that, it is not one person. I think that, Joe Rogan has had more lives than cats when it comes to changing it up. I grew up seeing Joe Rogan, have people eat testicles of animals and crawl through the darkness when he was doing Fear Factor. Then he did MMA, and now he's doing this. The man, he shapeshifts a lot. That's not necessarily what is the thing that's bringing people in. What Democrats have to do is figure out ways in which they can get to the podcast that their people are listening to. That means your younger voters, your people of color voters. They're getting a lot of information from things that are not, unfortunately, shows like ours right now, that are not shows of the competitors either. You have to find a way to break through that. And I think that for Democrats, largely, their investments have been in ad buys and campaigns that are focused on media that the young people, that diverse voter just aren't in anymore.
She's right and she's wrong. It's not that the liberal side need a Joe Rogan. The fact that Joe Rogan was open to having Kamala Harris on the show, but she declined to do so because she was incompetent and didn't feel comfortable talking past a 30-minute mark. And that's where the majority of her interviews is in the 30-minute mark, was the problem, and that she was an incompetent candidate. The other problem was that the Democrats don't really have a message that resonate with people, and we don't believe that they're authentic, justifiably so. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of Republicans that may be a little bit unsavory, and we don't necessarily trust them either. Again, I say this regularly. I think that the worst president in my lifetime was George W. Bush II. Followed closely by Biden. Followed very closely by Biden. But the worst president of my time, in my opinion, for me and my lifestyle and what I've experienced as a 42-year-old man living in Detroit, Michigan, the worst president of my lifetime was George W. II. And so it's not just like liberal side, conservative side, they need a Joe Rogan of their own. You can't make a Joe Rogan of your own. That's just naturally got to be in you. You can get as many people as you want. It's not about what you can make them. It's about whether or not you're authentic. What podcasters have exposed and what content creators have done is we've changed the media landscape completely on its head. We said, listen, I'm not pitching to you. I don't need you. And we can do it on our own. I don't need you. I do more views organically in long form content than anybody else in Michigan. Nobody in Michigan, considering all of my platforms combined, as a long form streamer and content creator, does more than I do in this entire state. You know what's happening? I'll tell you exactly what's happening. Everybody has become my friend. The sheriffs, anybody that has a vested interest in getting their message out and understand what's going to happen over the next 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 years, and is saying, hey, man, listen, I'm thinking about running for this, or I'm the incumbent mayor in this particular city, or this is what I resonate for. They look at my stats and they say, okay, wait a minute, I got to be friends with this guy. Because my voice resonates much greater in my state, in every city, than the traditional media. We don't care about your media buys. You got to come kick it with me now. You got to build a relationship. That's why when people say, Anton, would you ever run for office? For what? I got more power having my own voice and my own platform that's continuously growing every single year than I would have as a legislator myself. And so I don't think that Democrats understand the media landscape. They are still just throwing money at the wall, but they haven't tailored a message. It's similar to developing an application for somebody, and my company has developed applications for people. But before we do, we say, well, wait a minute. What's the point of developing the greatest app of all time if A, you can't maintain it, and B, you can't make inroads because you don't understand the marketing strategy as to why people would then download your app in the first place? You are not gonna get no traction. You got not gonna get no visibility. Now we'll take your money, but that don't mean that you're gonna actually become successful in this marketplace because you have to have a comprehensive strategy. And I think that Democrats have completely lost their understanding of what people want. They don't understand what's happening on the streets. They don't even understand what resonates with people. And so they thought that they could throw a bunch of money and that would make people come over to their side. People just took their money and left. Didn't matter.
I think Democrats need to find a message first. What
He's
is their
right.
message
He's
to voters?
absolutely
That I
right.
don't understand. Do they want to be the far left? Do they want to be moderate? Do they want to be, where do they want to land? I mean, it's so inauthentic to me to hear, like, we need to find our own. How are we going to create somebody out of thin air? First, they need to find a message and figure out who they are, and then figure all that out.
So it wasn't healthcare access. It wasn't housing affordability.
Nope.
It wasn't childcare affordability. It wasn't having assistance in
clearly
your
didn't-
home for the
it clearly
that
didn't work
sandwich
in this last
generation.
election,
None
so
of those
that's my
things.
Look, you guys are the one arguing all the time on TV and on radio and everywhere else about what the message is. I'm just saying they need to figure out the message, and then.
To be clear, Republicans argue about their message all the time, and I think
How the losers always gonna tell the winners what they need to do differently? No, you need to shut up and listen. You need to shut up and listen.
grew up with right-wing radio and obviously Rush Limbaugh. There's always been a robust right-wing media ecosystem. And the question I have is, how much of this is actually about audience and what you will allow? Meaning, the campaign didn't let Kamala Harris sit for 3 hours. And I don't think the campaign would have put her in front of Theo Vaughn to talk about his cocaine habit. Like, Democrats have a different
so
sense of, like,
stupid.
what's okay to do.
That's actually
Nope, and they're wrong. And you know how I know they're wrong? Is because when they tried to do their equivalent of Joe Rogan and they sat him in front of they sat her in front of Shannon Sharp got destroyed. I believe, honestly, of all of the moves that Shannon Sharp made last year or this year, and Shannon Sharp had an incredible year. He started off the year with a bang with Cat Williams. Shannon Sharp, Club Shay Shay don't have the same sachet that it did towards the beginning of the year. And I think that one of the main reasons is because he had Kamala Harris and it seemed like he was pandering. You can throw them on anything that all the smoke, caught the smoke. Shannon Sharp, caught the smoke. You can't just show up and think that that's the end of the conversation. It has to be more than that. It has to be more than that. I believe that people lost respect for people that were pandering, and it did not seem authentic. The one thing that Trump and JD Vance did was that they didn't put any kind of requirements. They didn't do any of that stuff. They said, listen, we gonna come and you can ask us whatever it is that you want, and we just gonna have a conversation, and it is what it is. And people were able to recognize the authenticity. They was able to recognize authenticity.
Actually, precisely the point. However, Bernie Sanders had no problem going on Joe Rogan years ago when Joe Rogan endorsed him. I've been on Rogan's show 3 times. I've probably heard over 100 hours of it in the past decade. A decade ago, Joe Rogan was a Bernie Sanders supporter who would get emotional talking about how important it is to legalize marijuana, who would get emotional talking about how important.
Hey, V12, chill out, bro. Chill out. Doing too much, man. Y'all, and it ain't even towards me, it's towards people in the chat. I keep telling y'all, man, y'all gotta start acting like adults. You gotta start acting like adults. You can't say that type of stuff about people. I keep telling y'all to calm down with the disrespect towards each other. I don't know why y'all don't act like y'all grown adults. What are y'all, 16 sometimes? Unreal, man. For real, chill out. Y'all be doing a lot. Doing a lot.
It is to get Christianity out of politics, in particular on the abortion issue, who had a host of left-wing opinions, including about healthcare. And liberals drove him away by calling him a racist, unearthing jokes he made, calling him a misogynist, really with no evidence.
When you make
calling
racist
him
jokes
a transphobe,
about people of color,
calling him, a
people
lot of
calling you
comedians
racist is
make
likely going to
jokes all the
happen.
time. Calling him transphobic because he didn't like
He
seeing
also didn't love
Fallon
the
Fox
vaccine thing, right?
beating up.
To our point earlier.
That also used to be a left-wing opinion, to be against vaccines like 20 years ago. Again, so he actually hasn't shapeshifted very much, to your point. The Democratic Party has shapeshifted and driven him away and alienated his followers.
I think what he ended up seeing was an American political sphere that shifted, and he found ways. He's a lot smarter than people give him credit for. He found ways to walk into where those people were. Yes, he was a proud, ultra leftist, and then he became a proud person on the right, largely because he saw shifting towards the right, and that's where his money and his audience could come from. He shifted because more of his listeners shifted, and that's where he drove it to. That's nothing more than consumerism at work.
Which of his beliefs changed in the past 10 years? It's really hard to point out which of his beliefs.
But can I zoom out from him? Because I think there is this, and I see you nodding as well, this kind of bigger question. Like, you have a Jon Stewart, right? You have Pod Save America. You have all kinds of the late night, television brigade.
They're all left on the late night shows. I think what he said to me, what rings true about this whole concept of finding the liberal Joe Rogan, is he said inauthentic. And when you talked about what Kamala Harris did in this campaign, knocking on doors, doing it sort of the traditional way, right? Raising tons of money. But there's something about Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, or Joe Rogan or whomever, they are authentic.
Right. Totally.
And that comes through to people. And when you're trying to get your message out, whatever that message is, you have to be authentic.
You
and I
can
think
be
they missed
authentic,
it
though,
this
when you have something like 20, 30 years in the public eye, specifically the tabloids. There's no gaffe. There's no thing that you can be tripped up by. I mean, you're a politician. You know what it's like. Very careful campaigns are.
The left needs to find a relevant voice that can live in that exact moment and be that authentic person, not just carrying the party's water.
So what about Pete Buttigieg? I see him everywhere online, and he goes on Fox constantly.
But he's not a Joe Rogan. He's not running a day-to-day.
No, I just mean like it's possible for figures to go out.
Absolutely. I mean, you got to hit all the boxes. You got to be a good communicator. You got to be relevant. You got to be able to push back. You got to be able to invite guests on that are newsy. But I think at the end of the day, the Democrats need an honest umpire. One of the most damaging parts of this entire campaign.
Say that again, an honest umpire.
An honest umpire to be able to
on.
call balls and strikes. And so one of the most detrimental things that Kamala Harris, in my opinion, did during the campaign was when she answered the question, what would you do differently than Joe Biden? She said nothing. Now, I think that was born out of respect for Joe Biden, but it rang in the ears of everybody trying to figure out who they wanted to.
That's the campaign said just this week.
If we want to have a relevant voice in the Democrat ecosystem,
You gotta be real.
you've got to have somebody willing to try to take those steps. One of the things I heard often on the campaign trail in these swing states was, you can respect an audience, but you don't have to overcompensate for an audience. And it felt like so much of the party platform of the Democrats were trying to compensate for parts of the party or parts of the policy positions.
This gets back to the coalition management.
And somebody needs to stand up and grab the reins.
And we also remember one thing here, because I keep hearing I heard it from you a couple of times, mandate, okay? Donald Trump's gotten almost 77 million votes. He's approaching 77 million. Kamala Harris is approaching 74.5 million. That's a $2.5 million vote difference, which is big, but not huge. So is it really, I mean, I know the Republicans have to always say it's a mandate. Is it really? I mean, that's still a lot of votes that Harris received in this
When you have
campaign.
the Senate and the House, I think that's pretty big voice that the American.
It was a solid victory, no doubt. Was it
The fact of the matter is that there's nobody in the Democratic Party that's authentic. And anybody that then shows any level of authenticity is extreme. They're extreme liberal. They're authentically crazy.